In this workshop, we're going to be looking at the best core exercises and even core training for golfers. Now, it's not necessarily what you might first think it's going to be. It is sport specific, but what we're going to do is we're going to try and break up and look at the components of what goes into a golf swing and try and recreate that in the gym. And then what that then allows you to do is try and piece those bits back together and then bring them to life on the golf course. We're going to go through 4 things. So first of all, we're going to talk about, I guess, a principle of contract, relax, contract. So that's what we're going to be using throughout most of this. Then we're going to go into essentially 3 parts to the workshop, which is going to be build endurance, rotate from the hips, and then tune the core. So these are all the different parts, and I'll be explaining in more detail and specifics about each part as we go through and how it applies to the golf swing. So firstly, we're talking about contract, relax, contract. Now, what does that mean? This isn't necessarily something that always gets mentioned when we talk about exercises, and certainly exercises when it comes to golf. What we need to be thinking about is the ability of the core to contract, then quickly relax, and then contract again. So what does this mean when it comes to golf? Well, as you move the club, so as you start the swing, there will be a short, very quick pulse of the core. As you bring it to the top, it will start to relax. As you then get to the top and then start the main part of the swing, there will be another contraction of the abdominals and of the core as a whole. So it will be sort of contract, relax, relax as you go through, and then there will be again a short contraction as you hit the ball. So this, when it comes to part 3, this is the part that we're looking to tune. So this is when we get to tuning the core. But that is the, let's just say, the overriding principle of what we need to create. So what we need to do before that is, first of all, build endurance, and then understanding the bracing of the abdominals and the contraction of the core. Now, in this first part, in building endurance, we're going to do it consciously. When you do the golf swing, when you're out on the golf course, it's not necessarily going to be that conscious. But what we want to keep doing is keeping the neural drive, keep the body learning that pattern. And then when you go out into the golf course, it will be that much more efficient and effective. So in part number 1, we're going to be looking at, first of all, building endurance, but also just getting the core working properly. So in this first part, as I've mentioned, we're talking about just building endurance. Now, why is this important? Well, it's all about keeping the body working most efficiently and effectively as time goes on. So we're trying to minimize the risk that fatigue is going to hamper the performance of the body. So what we need to be able to do is build the endurance. Now I'm just going to go through 3 very simple exercises. This isn't going to be a workout, but it's just showing you all the components that you need. If you want a workout, click the link in the description. You can go through to my How to Build Core Strength and Stability program, where you'll work on these types of concepts. So what we're going to do is, first of all, just come down into a plank. So very simple. I'm just going to come down. All I want to do, start in the kneeling position, and it's just a case of lift one leg, lift the other leg. Now I'm in this position, I'm holding, but what I am doing is not just doing the plank exercise for the sake of doing the plank exercise. What I'm trying to do also is trying to learn and brace the abdominals. So that's the rectus abdominis, the obliques on the outside, and we can always get the lats involved as well. Now, this, as I've mentioned before, this will be done consciously here to keep the neural drive, to keep the body recognizing on how to use these muscles. So when you go out onto the golf course, it recognizes it and does it much more naturally, much more unconsciously. So we come into this position. So I'm here and I'm lifting. Now I'm not just going to leave you in a plank for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's much more about taking a break in between and just allowing the body to rest, and then off we go again. So we would hold, we would then break for a period of time, then we would come back up and hold. Why is this important? Because that period of rest is not only removing some of the waste product build-up, so it's allowing the body to learn to clear waste product quicker and then get more blood and oxygen into the muscles so they can keep going. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is, again, it's just learning that very mild and gentle contract, relax, and just, again, tuning the brain into contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. So plank would be the first one to do, because that's going to do sort of the anterior part of the abdominal wall. The second one would be the side plank. For the very simple reason, we're now going down through the lateral parts. So again, we're doing exactly the same. It might be 10-second hold, 5 seconds down, 10-second hold, 5 second down, and just keep repeating that and repeating that. You may only need to go up to sort of a minute, 2 minutes of repeats, and then that will be enough and you can move on to the next exercise, or just finish the set and move on to the next set. So we've got, in the plank, we've got the anterior parts covered. In the side plank, we've got the lateral parts covered. What we're now going to do is add in joint stability into this. Also maintaining good spine health and back health, and we're going to use the bird dog. Now the bird dog, we come onto all fours, we maintain a neutral spine, and then we come out. So what we're doing here is we're bracing the abdominals, only mildly, because it only needs to be done appropriately to the task. So we're in this position, and we're holding. Again, we might just do a 10-second hold, come down, change sides. But again, we would keep repeating that out for sort of 1 minute, 2 minutes. What this exercise is doing is not only is it bracing the abdominal wall, but we're also activating muscles of the spine. So when I lift my right leg, I'm getting these muscles active. And then the opposite side when I lift the other leg. So again, it's tuning the muscles of the spine to stay healthy. And this is very much just about building a foundation of health throughout the body being able to keep going as it fatigues. So it's not necessarily, this isn't necessarily about golf specifically, but it's just building that foundation of what you need to then start building the other 2 layers on top, which is rotating from the hips and tuning the core, which we're going to look at now. In part 2, as I've mentioned, we're looking at rotating from the hips. What a lot of people like to do in the gym is rotate from the spine, because there is rotation of the spine in a golf swing, but as I've mentioned, when we come up into the back of the golf swing, we sort of relax here, then we pulse, then we relax. So most of the twisting is done as we are relaxed. Where we pulse is as we move the hips, so as the hips come through, and as any good golfer will know, this is where we get our power from. So what we need to be able to do is practice that rotation of the hip, or getting the rotation from the hip. Now again, we're going to use 3 exercises. We're going to use a cable, we're going to use a chop for the top part of the swing, we're going to use a reverse chop for the bottom part of the swing, and then we're going to bring it all together with a kettlebell, doing what's called an atlas swing. Again, we're moving from the hips. And it's all about just practicing that movement. It's not necessarily about perfecting the golf swing, it's just practicing that rotation from the hip. So we need to get away, certainly in sport-specific training, of trying to practice the movement under load. Whereas in golf, that's not necessary, because the golf swing doesn't require a lot of load. It needs a lot of neural drive and practice to perfect that. So all we're doing is using the different components of rotation from the hip and practicing that. So when we go out onto the golf course, that bit is tuned in, that bit is dialed in. We don't have to think about rotating from the hips, because we're automatically doing it, because we're training it in a gym setting. So what we're looking at, very simple, only needs to be a light weight. I'm not expecting it to be a heavy weight. But when we are talking about rotating from the hips, what we need to focus on is being in this position and then getting the movement from the hip. So I'm not pulling it with my arms and trying to rotate my spine. What I'm trying to do is pull with my hips and then just allow my arms to guide it. Because again, if you talk to any golf coach, that's what we're trying to create, is that movement from the hip and then the arms just guide through. You don't want to be driving down with the arms, because that's going to cause you a problem when you're trying to hit the ball. So it only needs to be a lightweight. We're taking that principle as well of bracing the abdominals, but you'll feel it when you do it. So you come into this position, you pull down, and we're just pulling down and through. So it's just tuning those hips to start bringing the arms down. And then what you should feel is it's relatively light with the arms. So we're just tuning that movement. Then obviously you can go the other side if you want to, depending on what sided golfer you are. You can do one side, you can do the other side, you can do both sides, whatever suits you best. So that's the top part of the movement. So what we would now look at, again, it's exactly the same. It's that from here, coming through. So we're now looking at that sort of swing through. Again, you can hold on to it with one hand if you wanted to. Either hand, top hand, bottom hand, whatever works best. But again, it's just trying to get that hip moving. You can move your feet in the same way as you sort of rock between each foot. Again, it's not trying to keep the load on the arms, it's keeping it on the hip. So that would be just two very simple ways to get started with rotating the hip. What you can then do is make it a little bit more dynamic with a kettlebell. So we're taking the exact same principles, we're holding this in front of us, and we're just getting it to swing. So again, it's all about using the hip to drive the arms through, creating that whip. So those are three very simple exercises to bring all those different components together. You've got the top of the swing, just bringing it through. You've got the bottom of the swing and the follow through. And then you've got bringing it sort of, in some respects, all together. But all the time, we're rotating from the hips and still remembering what we did in the plank and the side planks with regards to maintaining a brace. But when we get to this sort of movement and this sort of level, what starts to happen is it becomes a lot more unconscious. But we're using planks, side planks, bird dogs, even bridges to make it that way, so we can come into these exercises and be much better at the unconscious movements or the unconscious components of it, if that makes sense. In this final part, we're going to look at tuning the core. Now, what that basically means is something very similar to what we were doing in the last part, in that we're using these exercises, so the rotating exercises, to try and get the core to contract more effectively at the top of the swing, which is going to create the power, relax as you come through, and then again as you hit the ball it will contract again. So we want to be able to tune that. Now the very simple way to start to tune that, now we've done the plank and the side plank, but what we need to be able to do is once we're there, we just need to be able to contract, relax. So what we need to focus on is that part of the movement. So we need to be able, or we're going to do that in a plank. And a very simple way of doing that is a plank and then lifting an arm up. So we come down, normal position as we've done before. We come into here. So we're going to hold, and then what we're going to do, we're going to lift an arm up, and we're going to put it down. We're going to lift an arm up, and we're going to put it down. So that's the movement. As you move that arm up, this is going to contract. As you put it down, it's going to relax. As you pick this arm up, this is going to contract, relax. So it's constantly changing sides, contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. This is what's going to tune when, again, we go on to these chops and the swings. That's what's going to tune them, or in some respects help tune the core. Those are going to sort of really give it a good tune up. But this exercise is going to make you really conscious of just contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. Also, keeping the hips nice and still, because any instability through there is going to translate outward and also into the muscles as well. So things that we need to focus on whilst we're doing this exercise. Now, it doesn't really matter how many reps you do to start with, you're just focusing on moving the arm up, keeping the hips centered. So if it means doing 2, 1 on each arm, that's fine. If it means doing 10, which is 5 on each arm, then that's fine as well. all we want to be able to do is, in some respects, come into this position, wide feet, narrow elbows, keep the hips centered, and then as you change arms, keep the hips centered. So move slowly, holding the hips centered, and back up. So that's the type of exercise that we would use to tune the core. So we've got those 3 parts that we've talked about, and in some respects, we're kind of working on all of them throughout, but we're just enhancing certain components as we go through. So those are my best core exercises, and as I've talked about, best core training for golfers. So we've talked about contract, relax, contract as we go through the golf swing. We've also talked about building endurance, which is just about building that foundation of being able to, or your core muscles being able to last longer because you're out on the golf course for a prolonged period of time. So we've got those aspects. We then talked about rotating from the hips, because that's what every golfer does. That's what every golfer gets their power from, or every golfer should get their power from. And then finally, just tuning that and just bringing all that together. You can work on tuning the core with the chops and the swings. They can be included with that. But just trying to break each component out, that's how you would go about training each component, and then trying to bring it together in swings or swinging type exercises and in on the golf course. So it all kind of gets tied together when we get out there. So as I mentioned, those are my best core exercises and best core training for golfers.